Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today for a press conference with NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh. Be happy to take your questions at the end. Merci de nous rejoindre pour la conférence de presse avec le chef du NPD, Jagmeet Singh. On va prendre des questions à la fin. Alors, je passe la parole à Jagmeet.
Thanks so much, Elena. Thank you for being here. I had a call with the Prime Minister and I outlined some of our priorities in the short term. These priorities would indicate to us a willingness on the part of Justin Trudeau and the Liberals to work together. And so I outlined some of the things that I want to see that would show a willingness to work together. First and foremost, I outlined how important it is for New Democrats that the support that people need continue. And that's the CRB, that has to continue. The financial supports that people need have to continue. We know that people are going through a difficult time right now. There are a lot of worries and uncertainty. Alberta and Saskatchewan are being right now hit the hardest right now at this point than at any point in the 18 months of this pandemic. So they're feeling the brunt of the pandemic now. And that means we need to make sure that there's help for people. We also outlined how important it is for us to see immediate supports for frontline healthcare workers who are burnt out, who are struggling right now, who are in untenable work conditions because of staff shortages. So we want to see an immediate injection of supports to help out provinces, people that are needing care, and those frontline healthcare workers. I also outlined that for New Democrats, there's no question we need to see the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau stop taking Indigenous kids to court. There is no reason to be appealing this decision, and we've long called on the government to stop fighting kids in court, work out a settlement, negotiate with the community, with First Nations, but fighting them in court is the wrong thing to do. We also outlined, for me, another priority for us and our team is to see immediate supports for Iqaluit in Nunavut, where we know that the community is going through a water crisis and they need supports. We also talked about, I outlined the importance of seeing a response to the inflation. People right now are having a hard time and it's getting harder because the cost of groceries is going up, the cost of housing is going up, and we need to see some steps to address the rising cost of living and the inflation. And finally, I outlined for New Democrats, it is very important for us to see some action, real action on the climate crisis. Things are getting worse and worse, and Canada is not doing its part. Justin Trudeau has failed on a number of these really key points to reduce emissions, to end fossil fuel subsidies, and to lay out a clear plan with investments to ensure that workers have a bright future. We want to see those commitments, particularly with COP coming up. This is an opportunity for us to see some real action on the climate crisis. Action on these things would indicate to New Democrats a willingness to work together, and we would respond in kind. And that's something that's really important. I want to make sure that's clear. New Democrats want to work together. We want to make Parliament work for Canadians, but the Liberals cannot take our support for granted. Donc, aujourd'hui, j'ai eu une conversation avec le Premier Ministre Justin Trudeau et j'ai partagé les priorités pour nous comme parti et les priorités qu'on veut voir. On veut voir des actions concrètes et ça va montrer une volonté de travailler ensemble. Donc, on a dit qu'on veut voir tout de suite des actions concrètes pour investir dans les soins de santé. Nos travailleurs en première ligne ont peur pour l'avenir, ont peur ont des frustrations à cause de la pandémie. Donc, on doit avoir des investissements urgents et rapides pour aider nos travailleurs de première ligne en santé. Aussi, pour nous, c'est essentiel qu'on continue l'aide aux gens. La PCRE, c'est essentiel, particulièrement dans ce temps, avec la 4e vague de la COVID-19, on doit continuer l'aide financière aux gens. On a dit aussi que le gouvernement libéral et Justin Trudeau doivent arrêter tout de suite les poursuites contre les enfants autochtones dans les cours de justice. Ils doivent arrêter de poursuivre les enfants autochtones tout de suite. On a dit aussi qu'on veut voir de l'aide pour la communauté en Nunavut, particulièrement à Iqaluit, parce qu'ils ont une crise de l'eau potable à ce moment. On a aussi dit qu'on veut voir des actions pour régler l'inflation, c'est une urgence aussi parce que le coût de la vie augmente et les gens n'ont pas les moyens pour rejoindre les deux bouts. Et c'est encore plus difficile à cause de l'inflation. Donc, c'est aussi quelque chose qu'on veut voir. Finalement, on a dit qu'on veut voir des actions concrètes pour faire face à la crise climatique, particulièrement avec le grand congrès, la grande conférence qui s'en viennent. On veut voir des actions concrètes pour arrêter les subventions aux pétrolières, pour investir dans les bons emplois qui réduisent nos émissions et un plan pour réduire nos émissions. Donc, ce sont les priorités. On veut voir les actions concrètes et ça va montrer une volonté de travailler ensemble. Merci. Thank you. With that, I'm ready for any questions. Back to you, Elena.
Thank you, Jagmeet. I would just ask that you use the raise hand function, please, and there'll be one question and one follow-up question. Je vous demande d'utiliser la fonction lever la main pour poser des questions et une question suivie, s'il te plaît. So I think first we have Catherine Levesque. Go ahead.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Bonjour.
Je voulais vous reparler de la PCRE. Selon le NPD, ça doit se poursuivre jusqu'à quand? Et quelle a été la réponse de M. Trudeau quand vous lui avez demandé de la prolonger?
On pense qu'on doit prolonger la PCRE jusqu'au moment que la pandémie finit, où on a une alternative avec une assurance-emploi qui fonctionne. Comme vous savez, à ce moment, l'assurance-emploi ne fonctionne pas pour la grande majorité des gens. Ça veut dire 60% des Canadiens et Canadiennes ne peuvent pas accéder à l'assurance-emploi. Donc, on doit vraiment changer ça. Et sinon, donc, on doit continuer l'aide aux gens jusqu'à le moment que les gens n'ont pas besoin de cette aide. C'est clair à ce moment, avec la 4e vague de la COVID-19, avec la situation en Alberta et Saskatchewan, qu'on est vraiment toujours dans la crise et les gens ont toujours besoin de l'aide.
Et je voulais aussi vous entendre sur la vaccination des députés. Donc, il y a eu le bureau de la Régie interne qui a publié sa décision hier. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez du fait des conservateurs qui s'y opposent, en fait, et qui n'acceptent tout simplement pas la décision du bureau de la Régie interne?
Je pense que la décision était une bonne décision. C'est clair qu'on doit protéger les travailleurs qui travaillent sur la colline, mais aussi les autres députés. Donc, l'importance d'être vacciné, il n'y a aucun doute. Donc, je suis d'accord avec la décision. Je ne comprends pas pourquoi les conservateurs y opposent. Et on va continuer de dire clairement qu'on doit avoir un milieu de travail sécuritaire, sanitaire, et ça veut dire que tous les gens doivent être vaccinés.
Thank you. Next, we have David Thurton from CBC.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thanks for taking our questions. The question I just want to ask you is maybe if you can just, I know you've been asked this a million times, but just if you could just state maybe what are your top policy areas that you think your party and the Liberals are in agreement with? And what priorities are you prepared to work quickly with the government on, in the next couple of months?
Well, I want to be really clear on this. There are things that the Liberals have said that they're interested in doing that we believe in very firmly that we need to do. And I'm concerned that they often say the right things but don't do it. So I'll lay out some of the things that we've said and that the Liberals have said that they support. But again, we're not going to hold our breath. We want to see some actions. Paid sick leave. 22 times over the past 18 months, we said there needs to be paid sick leave in this country. There needs to be no question about a worker getting sick, whether they can go into work, whether they have to go into work sick because they don't have paid sick leave and they don't have enough support to be able to pay their bills at the end of the month. So that's something that we really believe in. After saying no 22 times, now Mr. Trudeau in the middle of the campaign said he's interested in it. We want to see action on that. That's something that would signify a willingness to work together. We've long said that for us, childcare is of course vital, essential. We want to see the job finished. We're ready to work on that. I outlined a number of the other concerns. We want to see financial supports continue. not just the CRB. We also want to see paid sick leave, the caregiver supports continue. We want to see those financial supports continue. We want to see small businesses continue to receive things like the wage subsidy. We want to make sure that those supports are tied directly to work and workers, but we think that those supports are really important for a lot of small businesses. We've said that healthcare is important, and so as the Liberals, but we want to see a commitment to helping people right now. While we know there are staff shortages for frontline healthcare workers, we want to see those staff shortages and the investments made immediately so that we can help people out. We've mentioned a number of times how important for New Democrats it is to fight the climate crisis. We know that people are so worried about this. Kids are worried about the future. People are feeling the impacts right now. We just came out of a summer of intense forest fires across the country. We need to act now to tackle the climate crisis. And with COP coming up, there's an opportunity to signal what
Recording in progress.
That are up against a deadline. They do not have any other way of putting food on the table. They rely on the CRB. To cut that would be horrible for a lot of people, and it would really signify to us that Mr. Trudeau is sending a message. He's not wanting to work together. So we're going to watch closely and see what happens with the supports that people need. In addition to that is the immediate healthcare crisis. There's a lot of people right now that are worried about our healthcare system being with a lot of healthcare workers at their limit. And we want to see an injection of support to keep the staffing levels at the level they need to be and to immediately help out in this crisis. So those are some of the things that are really urgent and immediate. Paid sick leave fits into that as well as some immediate things that we can deal with.
Okay, our next question comes from Joan Bryden.
Sorry, I was on mute. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, you can.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you could clarify, please. You've said in the past that the New Democrats, you would withhold your vote, I believe is the way you phrased it. You know, if you didn't agree with things that the government was doing in the minority situation. So that's not quite the same, or might not be quite the same. And I guess that's what I'm asking you to clarify. Is it the same as saying you'll vote against them? You bring the government down if there's things that you disagree with?
Absolutely, we're prepared to vote against the government if they make the wrong decision, if they do something that hurts Canadians, and we will also be prepared to withhold our support. Our goal is to make Parliament work for people, and we made it really clear. There's a lot of things that we want to work together on, but I want it to also be clear that the Liberals can't take our support for granted. Our support will be there if it's to help people. Our support will be there if it's to make life better for folks. That's investing in childcare. That's making sure we tackle the climate crisis. That's making sure that we get help to people on the front lines in our healthcare system to make sure people can get the healthcare they need when they need it. And if it comes to those type of things, our support will be there. But if it's a decision that's going to hurt people, then no, we'll withhold our vote, and we are prepared to vote against.
Did you have a follow-up, Joan? Joan, if you do have a follow-up, I think you might be on mute.
Okay, there, I'll try again.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm a techno idiot. What can I say? You've listed a bunch of things that are priorities for your party and that you would take as signs that the government was willing to work together. I guess I'm trying to figure out the balance, you know, if they do some of those things, but not others. How do you weigh that?
We want to look at this as, is the government willing to work together? And we want to look for opportunities to work together. Our goal is to make this parliament work for people. And that's a very important goal. Canadians sent us here very clearly in a minority government. And Canadians are going through a lot of struggles right now. There are a lot of real worries out there. People are worried about how they're going to pay their bills with the cost of groceries going up. People are worried about finding housing. They were worried about that before. And with the inflation, they're finding it even harder and harder to find adequate and good housing. So given the real worries of people, we want to make Parliament work. But we want to make sure it works not just so that the Liberals stay in power. That's not our interest. Our interest is to make this Parliament work for people. And we've laid out some of the things that we want to see that would give us a clear indication of the willingness of the Liberals to work with us. And we would assess that and look at the decisions they're making and assess whether or not they want to work with us or not.
Okay, next we have a question from Mary Brooke. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, Mr. Singh. So I'm looking at this, a few of these questions have been similar, firm versus flexible. I'd like to know what your absolute deal breakers would be with the Liberal government, and where you're willing to cooperate and move things along with negotiation. And if part of that would also be pushing for the Canada Health Transfer to be increased.
Thanks for the question. We haven't put down any firm lines in the sand or orange lines. We haven't listed those, but we have listed our priorities because we want to present a productive way forward. So we want to lay out the things that we want to see. We want to see investments in healthcare. And so increasing investments in healthcare, we're a party that was founded on healthcare. We believe fundamentally that no one should have to worry about getting the care they need. It shouldn't matter how much money you have in your bank account or how much you earn. Everyone is entitled to getting good quality healthcare, and we need to fund it appropriately so that people get the care they need. So that's something that would signify to us a willingness to work together, investments in healthcare, continuing the financial support that people need. We know that people are still struggling and they need support. Continuing that support would be a signal to us that the government's willing to work together. Making sure there's concrete action on fighting the climate crisis with the COP approaching, that's another indication to us of a willingness to work together. So we want to frame this as, we want to make Parliament work. Show us that you're interested in making Parliament work by moving on these priorities, by doing something that actually makes life better for Canadians. And in doing that, it would signify to us that they're willing to work together, and we're ready for that.
Are there any other questions at this time? Y a-t-il des autres questions?
I had a follow-up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, specifically the GIS for seniors, are you going to push for that right at the start to get that dealt with? Apparently there's no need for legislation for that. It can be done by cabinet order. So would you be pushing for that? And then also for the digital rights and technology that Peter Julian spoke about the other day, would that be front and center?
I really appreciate the question. I should have mentioned, and when I was talking about supports for people, I made it really clear in my conversation with the Prime Minister today that he has to end the clawbacks of GIS. And just so folks know, these are some of the most vulnerable seniors who are seeing their monthly supports, their GIS, get clawed back. And we're hearing stories, heartbreaking stories of seniors who are, again, these are some of the most vulnerable, who are not receiving their full GIS support that they need. And that means they're not able to actually stay in their homes. They're not able to pay their rent. They're not able to buy groceries. And so this is a very serious problem that needs to be fixed. And I made it clear to the Prime Minister, that's something that needs to be fixed if they want to show us their willingness to work together. So that's something that's really important. And I outlined that in speaking about the supports to people.
So we'll have one more call for any final questions. I'm seeing another question. I'm not sure, David, if you have another question or if you just didn't put your hand down.
Yeah, I do. Mr. Singh, you mentioned inflation is a worry for you. The Bank of Canada announced today that inflation, is back up at 4%, or is quite high. So, what do you think is the government's approach to tackling this? The Conservatives would like to see the pandemic benefits claw back. There are other people who are saying that this is driven by, it's not that incomes are increasing or there's too much money in economy, it's a supply issue. So what do you think the role of the federal government is in tackling this issue?
The role is to look at what the impact is on people. And the impact is it's getting harder for people to be able to afford the things that they need. And in a time of difficulty, we believe we got to make sure there's more help for people. So that means we certainly cannot end the supports that people need. And then in addition, we need to look at the specific problems. One of the major concerns that's been outlined in inflation is housing and the cost of housing. That has already been a problem in Canada for a long time, and it's only getting worse. So we need to see a real plan to invest massively in ensuring that people have good quality housing. And that means making sure we help people buy their first homes. It also means making sure there's good quality rental homes available, places for people to afford that's within their budget. So housing is one of the key factors of this increase in inflation. We also know that in difficult times, the wrong thing would be to cut the help that people need, and we need to continue those supports.
Okay, thank you for that. I just want to ask you about a story that CBC has up. My colleague Rafi Bujikanian has up. It's about the Federal Immigration Department. A survey was released from employees that, basically they reported working in a very racist workplace environment. I'm just wondering what your reaction to this is, and perhaps what concern you might have for this department that, works with, vulnerable Black and Brown communities that are trying to, flee certain situations or, start new lives in Canada.
It's extremely troubling. The department that responds to the crises that people from around the world are faced with, often people who are racialized, the fact that there's allegations and concerns of racism in a department that deals with people who are racialized is deeply, deeply troubling and cannot continue. So we need to make sure that those concerns are addressed and that there is no racism, there's no systemic racism in any of our federal institutions, in any institution in Canada, but particularly it makes it even more egregious when it's a department tasked with dealing with on a regular basis people who are racialized. This is deeply troubling.
Okay, I'm seeing one more question from Joan Bryden.
Yes, hi.
Hey
was wondering, I'm wondering if you could just, you commented in French on the Conservatives pushing back against this decision to require everyone in the House of Commons precinct to be fully vaccinated. What, in your view, what happens now? And what happens to the Conservative MPs who are either not vaccinated or won't tell anybody whether or not they've been vaccinated? And what rights do they have as members of Parliament to their parliamentary privilege to be in the House and be heard?
I think first and foremost, we want to keep people safe. So the idea of making sure that all staff and members of Parliament are vaccinated, it is an important measure to keep everyone safe. We've got workers there, we've got people that are on the staff, we've got people that are staff members that are going to be potentially exposed. And we know the evidence is really clear that when you're vaccinated, it reduces the risk of transmission and it keeps people safer. So there's no question that was the right decision. In terms of making sure people can participate in the House of Commons, we support the hybrid model, which has worked in the past 18 months, which allows people to virtually participate in Parliament. I think in this pandemic, for various reasons, one might be vaccinated, but have had exposure to someone, maybe a constituent, maybe someone in the community, and then that member of Parliament might have to quarantine or might have to stay at home or reduce their exposure. In that case, that member of Parliament shouldn't be traveling to the House of Commons and should participate virtually. So I feel The hybrid model is a way to make sure people participate and can voice the concerns of their community without putting people at risk. And there's really no question, as elected officials, we need to be showing leadership, and getting vaccinated is an important step to fight this pandemic.
Sorry, if I could just follow up quickly. The Conservatives are also the most adamant that Parliament should return to, fully normal in-person functioning. They were the most reluctant to agree to hybrid in the first place, and they want to get rid of it now. So how do you square that with their refusal to say whether or not they've been vaccinated?
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay, this is the end of our press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Thank you. Merci.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody. Merci beaucoup.